Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Unwind with Dan. If you watched my previous video, you'd know I don't think an overconsumption of negative media is wise. One of the main reasons for that is that it can make oneself feel more negatively inside. However, the premise of this video is about why those emotions even exist. Moreover, why are they so important to us being human? I won't cover every negative emotion as that would be impossible. So today we will discuss the importance of sadness. Why does this emotion even exist? If we think about it ancestrally, in what situation would crying or feeling down actually help us? If we think about this in terms of strictly fight or flight, then sadness doesn't really seem to make sense. In a survival sense, it doesn't fit in with anger and fear, trying to keep us adrenaline-filled and alert. In an emotional sense, it doesn't make as much sense as just feeling happy. Why would we have evolved to suffer mentally? An idea that might resonate within yourself is this concept that feeling sad brings us together. It's an emotion that sharing will usually allow it to be more easily processed. It is this vulnerable state of mind and physical state that you truly have to trust people in order to be able to comfortably share with them, maybe even cry. It is this trust that will inherently bring us together when we do share these times of sentiment. Since we are social creatures, then it makes complete sense why we would have biologically evolved this state. A way for us to confide with each other, make stronger social bonds, and overall improve the survival for our ancestors. However, philosophically, sadness also makes sense. Some believe sadness is a necessity to put happiness into perspective. How can we truly know what true joy is if we never experience the opposite? So with this idea, we can think of sadness as a way to make happiness more impactful. If we use the inevitable suffering in our lives to be more grateful for the good times, then at least there's some use for sadness in that sense. A more objective example of this is something called bracing. This is when people stop themselves, feeling fully joyous in situations due to being afraid of the disappointment for when it ends. If we can healthily embrace sadness, I believe it can help us, in the long run, to be happier. The last point I wanted to discuss is that without sadness, psychologically, we would have no emotion which feeds back to us that something needs to change. Whilst anger also does this, anger tends to push people away. Whereas, like mentioned earlier, sadness brings people together. Whether it be in relationships, at work, or just life in general. If we never felt sad, we wouldn't know when something needs to be done differently. As long as we listen to the sadness, accept it, and process it, when we are ready, we can face this challenge in our lives and talk gently to whoever is causing it, hopefully allowing for change and forgiveness to ensue. We could try and fix the issue ourselves, or if it's something that just can't be changed, then the only thing we can do is learn to avoid it or learn to live with it and accept it in our lives. For example, some sadness, like the heartbreak from an ending relationship, is something we just can't fix. Perhaps there are still ways to mend the relationship, but if all else fails, then all we can do is accept it. Sometimes sadness is just a part of life. When I had my first heartbreak, a way I started to see it, which helped me process it, was seeing this sadness as proof that something I had was genuine and actually love. It may have been a young and ignorant version of it, but nonetheless it was real. It was something that deserved sadness, something that just trying to ignore would be wrong. That grief, whilst terrible, did have benefits to my life in the present. It made me closer to my friends who I shared my experiences with. It helped me put into perspective the joy I have in my current life now. And I learned a lot from that grief. I learned what I needed in a relationship. I learned how to better deal with issues in relationships. I learned how to better deal with issues in myself. All of which hopefully will prevent a heartbreak like this happening again. All of that sadness actually led to me being a much stronger and wiser person. And I'm grateful that I had that experience. It's sad to see these days that so many people, especially men, think that crying and being sad in general, let alone to someone you love, is a sign of weakness, a sign that you aren't a man. It's a toxic view spread by quite a few influencers these days, and I think it's terrible. I do agree, though, to an extent that we shouldn't cry all the time, and there is a time and a place, but to never do it at all is unwise. Repressed emotions, especially sadness, can lead to a number of different problems, like low energy and depression. Some of you may think that sadness and depression are interchangeable. I won't go into too much detail, but the basic answer is that no, they are not. Sadness is healthy. Depression, on the other hand, is a medical condition. It can be caused by terrible things happening in your life, but also by your own brain's chemicals just being unbalanced. Some common symptoms are a consistently very low mood and a loss of joy in the things you used to love. But there are many symptoms, and it's completely different for everyone who suffers with it. If you think you suffer from undiagnosed depression, it's very important you consider calling up your GP and getting a consultation. Lots of people leave it too late, and it just ends up leading to the mental illness becoming worse. Some further links about this will be in the description. Now, when I was a kid, I found myself down this rabbit hole of toxic masculinity, and I thought whenever I got sad, I should just push it away. It led to me just feeling numb and having a lower, more fatigued mood all the time. Trying to push away sadness just made everything worse. It was a weird time, but eventually I broke out of the bad mindset. Ever since I started listening to sadness and not being afraid to show it, life has just been so much better. The processing of sadness has done nothing but lead to me having an overall greater sense of positivity and joy. However, it is not to say that we should let our emotions control us. Sometimes suppressing them is required. For example, if you're at work and your boss frustrates you deeply, bursting out into anger or tears is definitely not the best decision. Sometimes we need to suppress these emotions to keep a level head in the current situation and deal with the feelings later at a more appropriate time. Most of us probably can't think straight when we are overwhelmed with emotion, and it is this reason why I believe we need the ability to sometimes suppress these feelings until we're in a safe space with people we trust. It's why I don't want to completely discredit the notion that we shouldn't cry. I think, like a lot of the things I talk about, it's about a balance. Being in control of your sadness enough that you can keep a level head in times of turmoil, but having the awareness and insight to know when to process it properly and deal with it in a healthy way. So how do we process it? Now, I'm not an expert, but there is one way I'll talk about here. As hinted at throughout, one of the most consistently best ways to help is by reaching out and talking to others. Your friends, your family, or sometimes even a professional are all people we should feel comfortable going to in times of sadness. Just being able to voice your feelings can really take the weight of it off your shoulders. And whilst it may not solve whatever is causing you to feel this pain, sometimes we don't need to solve anything. Sometimes we just need to voice the anguish, and that can be enough to help us feel joy again. Then when we feel better, that's when we can try and fix whatever was the cause. Now, there are many ways to try and deal with sadness on your own. For example, starting a journal or practicing mindfulness, but I won't go into them here. If you are feeling down and need some more advice, there will be some websites in the description to help explore these topics for yourself. Sadness is important. It can bring us together. It can make us realize change is needed. It can bring us more joy in the long run. Society needs to stop pushing this essential emotion away. I'm not advocating we let it control us, but we need to have the insight and awareness to process these feelings when the time is right. Whether it be with loved ones or on our own, the more healthily we embrace sadness, I strongly believe the better our lives become. And that brings us to the end. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. As always, any references and my piano notes are in the description. I hope you have a peaceful day. Thank you for listening to Unwind with Dan.